Tonight's a special night. A few weeks back, this young man approached me and just said that God had been laying something on his heart. So we got to meet a little bit and talk about that. And so we're going to have a guest speaker tonight. I'm going to invite Alex Walker up tonight. If everyone would give a round of applause. I'm looking forward to hearing. I've gotten to hear kind of what his message is about, and I think it's going to be powerful. And I'm expecting great things, and I pray that you are expecting something as well. So get ready to hear a great word tonight.
Hey, everybody. Probably weren't expecting me to come up here. I can understand that. I got a great joke for you guys. I feel like I should start with a joke. Why did they let Jesus into the jewelry shop? Because they were afraid he would break every chain. Right? So you're probably wondering why I'm up here tonight, and Chase gave a nice, wonderful introduction. And I want to start with more so of my testimony, sort of where I come from. I think that's the best way to get to know someone, especially a fellow believer in Christ. And so my testimony starts off, I grew up in a church. I'm originally from Knoxville, Tennessee, which is like 5.5 hours south of here. It's just below the Mason-Dixon line, so I consider myself Southern. And I grew up in a Christian family. I went to a church called Park West, and Jesus was always something just in my life. Like he was there, and he was always a part of me. He was something that was just, it was freely given, which is a wonderful thing to have, and I think it's a thing that people should have. And it's the key to the story later on is that I grew up with it, that I started with it. As my life progressed, I got older, and my mom ended up getting sick with fibromyalgia, if you know what that is. And she got very, very sick. She was hard for her to do things, hard for her to go out places. And so with everything that was going on, it was harder to get to church. We still would make it on Sundays, but we couldn't make it on Wednesdays. And it was tough seeing her. And then this is sort of where the start of a lot of arguments started happening between myself and my mom, between my mom and my dad. Some arguments broke out over finances, over silly things, school, different things like that. As it kept going, this division started creating from that, which is just something wild. My mom became almost this, I hate to say it this way, like a bad guy. And then me and my dad were the good guys, right? You know, and me and my dad were struggling, we were doing things, and those things just weren't making sense to my mom. My mom was upset, and we eventually found out later down the road it's just ADHD. So me and my dad, we work differently. We go about things differently. We can't do things the same as normal people, whatever that means. And so that's what caused a lot of these problems. We didn't learn that until much later on down the road. However, it got so bad to where I couldn't have conversations with my mom without getting into an argument. Like it was really bad. And my dad was the same way. And I remember this very specific moment right before I went off to college. And my dad, it was just me and my dad in the house, and my dad looked at me and he said, I don't know how much longer me and my mom are going to be together. And I remember saying to him, yeah, I kind of figured, which is tough. It's a hard thing to swallow, and I never really got the gravity of it until into my sophomore year of college. I get a phone call from my mom over the phone, and it's actually on my dad's birthday. He decided to leave. He packed up all of his stuff in the car and decided to leave and started off with separation. This had a huge impact on my mom and my life, and it changed who I thought my dad was. And it had me question a lot of things and struggling with things. I became an emotional support person for my mom while she's going through this separation, which eventually ends up leading to divorce. And it's something, to be honest, I still struggle with today with my mom and that relationship. And that we're trying to grow from it. But all throughout college, I never really was seeking God. I never really looked into God. He was there. He was a small part of me. You know, God's there, and I would go to church every now and then. There was a church literally a minute from campus. I just didn't go. Great church. Is wonderful, and I just didn't go. And he was just a small part, but he was always there, and that's the important part. He was always there. He was always prevalent. And he as I went through college, nothing really happened until I came and got a job here working at Crane, living in Bloomington, and I came to this church, and over the course of this church was sort of not necessarily a catalyst, but a support. The catalyst was a really dear friend of mine who I met at the beginning of last year, and she really showed me what it was to have passion for God, right? What it was to seek God as if it were the first time. And for her, it was the first time. She had lived a life wildly away from God, and she had had this crazy experience to come meet God. And from then, her whole life turned around and changed. And watching someone with such passion and such fire just ignited that little bit of thing that was in me. And it just grew, and it grew, and I wanted to know more, and I wanted to see more, and I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to read the Bible. I found Romans. I started in Romans, and I worked my way to Acts. And then I went back, and then I went to Ephesians, and then I went through the rest of the New Testament. I kind of stopped at Revelations, a little spooky. We're coming back to that. And then I was like, oh man, the New Testament, or the Old Testament sounds cool. So I started, for some reason I skipped Genesis. I don't know what that was about, and I just kept going through. And the gist of it is, I got this passion, right? Like I got this fire, and I've loved it ever since. And that's where sort of I'm at now, right? I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, God, I finally showed up. it's been a while, but I'm here. Like, what is it you have for me? What is it you want to do to me? And this was one of the messages that he sort of put in my heart, and one of the things he told me to do. It's one of the reasons I reached out to Chase in the first place. Was God gave me this idea of like, what if you gave it all? Like, what if you knew you couldn't fail? Right? Like, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I was like, oh, that's crazy. And so, as I was reading through, I was reading through the Bible, and I came across a specific scripture that we'll get into here in just a little bit. But I have a little experiment before we get into that for everybody. A little, crowd participation. I would like everyone to raise their hand real high. Okay, higher. There you go. All right, so the question I have for you is, why did you raise it that high on the first time? Right? Like, why did I said raise it really high, right? And you were like, or some of you were up here. Yeah, I saw you guys, and some of you guys were like, yeah, all the way up here. And some people, which is completely fair, because I'm in the same boat, didn't raise their hand at all, right? Like, I found myself going, hey, everybody, I want crowd participation. Everybody say hallelujah. And we all go, hallelujah. We don't really do anything. And I find myself doing the same thing, where I'm not all in for some reason. And I think this verse helps unpack that, helps break that open. It's a story found in 2 Kings. So if you guys have a physical Bible like this one right here, or not, I wasn't clever enough to put it up on the screen, so you're going to have to work with me here. Don't expect that screen to turn on. It's not going to. But 2 Kings is where we're going. It's right after 1 Kings. The first one was so good they made a sequel. Okay. 2 Kings. I gotta get stuff I didn't put any bookmarks. 2 Kings 4, 1 through 7 is where we're going. Some of you already know this for this little story that's about to be told. And it's with Elisha. Elisha was a cool guy. Elisha was that guy who, was kind of that all-in person. He was like, Elijah, I saw what you did. I want a dose of it. I want macho more. I want a lot. And so here we have a story, and I'm going to read through. I'm going to read all through 1 through 7, and then we'll give a little brief summary about it. All right. So the wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" She replied, "Your servant has nothing at all," she said, "except for a small jar of olive oil." Elisha said, "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into the jars, and as each one is filled, put it to one side." She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her sons, "Give me another one." But he replied, there's not a jar left." And the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left." This is a really, really cool story. So basically, it's this lady, her husband died, and for some reason, the people, they're going to take the 2 boys, right? It's like a thing. It's a work, right? It's a thing in the Old Testament with slavery and the year of Jubilee, all that stuff. We could definitely take time to get into that. I'm not going to. But anyway, she's asking the prophet to help her because she knows he's a man of God. She's like, my husband was a man of God, out here. And so he's like, looking around for things. So the first point I want to bring us to is, what do you have? All right? So in 2 Kings 4:2, Elisha asks, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? So her response was, your servant has nothing there at all. She said, well, except a small jar of olive oil. Just strange, right? She started off first with, I have nothing. I don't have anything. I'm broke. That's why they're coming to take my boys away. I'm broke. And then she looked basically around again, and she was like, oh, I got a small jar of olive oil. Don't know how good that'll do me, but I got it. Here you go. And what's crazy is we do the same thing, right? Like, we look around at our lives, and we look around at the things we have, and we're like, man, I don't really have a lot going on. And then God's like, you got me? I got a small jar of olive oil. All right. And we sort of limit God to this smallness, right? We sort of put like this little thing on God. Oh, he's this small jar of olive oil over here. I don't really have anything, except this small jar of olive oil. So I want you to go through, as we're going through this, I want you to understand an important analogy here in the story. So the jar is us. This empty jar is us. Now, the olive oil is God. His blessings, things like that. All right? And when I say jar, it's it can be plural, right? It can be multiple jars. But in this case, the jar nonetheless. And I want you to take inventory of yourself. How little have you reduced God in your life, right? Like, take a look at, God, he has, when I go to church, that's when God's there. I see God in church, I'm pretty cool, right? But when I go to work, do I see God? Right? Is he there? I don't know. Did I reduce him to just church? Did I reduce him to just Wednesday at church? Did I reduce him to just hanging out with friends? Like, find out where have you put God? You sort of left him there, and when you do the second look, that's what you see. So I'm gonna go to the next point here, which is who are your neighbors? Okay? So this is a very crucial part of the story. In 2 Kings 4, verse 3, it says, go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. That's the key thing. Now, it took me a little bit to understand what it meant by go ask your neighbors. What I originally thought this was, hey, don't go ask your neighbors for full jars, right? Like, oh, I don't want full jars, don't bless me, God's going to bless me. That's not exactly right. What it's talking about here, the reason why Elisha has her going to her neighbors to get this empty jars, she already has her own empty jars, right? He has to go as the neighbors for empty jars. And the reason being is because there are neighbors. You have friends who see the empty jars in your life. And these jars are jars that are empty because God's not in them. Right? Like there are certain things that our friends can see in us that we can't. Right? And so that's why we have to go out to our neighbors. We have to go out and seek those around us. Because we can say, oh, well, I know God. God isn't in my work. I get that. Sure. And our friends are sometimes like, yeah, God ain't in how you dress either. I don't know if you looked at yourself recently. And you're like, oh, maybe I should wear longer pants or something. And so those friends are a key aspect to this. And this is why Elisha tells us to do this. But then the next thing is like, why does he say empty jars? Right? Why didn't he say full jars? Right? And this confused me for a little bit, right? The reason why he asked for empty jars is because he doesn't want, God doesn't, a friend's full jar, right, that they have their own jar of olive oil. Then with God, that jar of olive oil can't save you, right? Their salvation, their understanding of God isn't going to get you your understanding of God, right? Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. It's commonly said that salvation of your parents can't save you. Like it's got to be your thing. And so that's why we're not going to our neighbors to ask for full jars, but we're asking them for empty jars because we need to find the parts that God is trying to reveal to us, and we can't do it alone. We need friends. We need people, right? 2 or more, that's what God is, right? And so it's key that you have good friends. You don't want friends that come up to you and go, oh, here's your full jar. I've experienced God, so here you go. And you're like, well, thank you for your testimony, but I'm looking for, what am I missing? What is God trying to reveal in me? Did you see what God's trying to reveal in me? And when they do see it, then they point it out to you. You need the friends who will take the time to point it out to you. Sometimes you don't even ask for it to point it out to you, right? Like that happens to me often. I have a friend who will say, we'll be talking about God, and then they're like, man, I don't know what I feel about trusting God. And I'm like, what do you mean trusting God? They're like, well, how is trusting God different from faith in God? And I was like, faith is believing the things unseen. Right? But what is trust? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I need to take more time to learn what that trust in God is. Maybe there's this aspect that I haven't seen, right? And maybe there's this part that I haven't realized or haven't recognized about God. And it takes talking to other people to realize those aspects, to find those empty jars, right? Because sometimes friends can be more hurtful, which is why God takes you away from them. Causes a separation. You're like, why am I so lonely? And you're like, well, your friends are, criticizing you for your empty jars, as opposed to helping you recognize them and realizing they need God to fill those empty jars. So that brings us to a third point, right? It says after you go and ask your friends for these empty jars, you've now gotten all these empty jars, right? You've got big jars, I've got small jars. This jar is finances. This jar is, friends. This jar is work. This jar is kids, right? Like we've got all these jars. Now, where do you go with those jars, right? In 2 Kings 4:4, it says, "Then go inside and shut the door behind you." Right? So where do you go? Now, for a while, I thought this was, maybe it's a physical place or maybe it's a spiritual place. But the key behind this isn't necessarily the location, right? It's not like a headspace. It's not physical space. It can be those things. Don't get me wrong. It absolutely can be. But what Elisha's trying to show her is intentionality. You have to approach this with the intent of finding God. With the intent that God is going to fill these jars. And so you need to go to a place, right? You need to intently put yourself somewhere where God can move, where God can act, right? Because sometimes we find ourselves putting our intent into other things, right? For me, it's video games. Put my intent into video games, and for some reason I don't see God. Well, it's because my intent is in the wrong place. My focus is on this wrong thing, and my focus should be directed. When I'm trying to get God to fill my life, to find these parts of me, and for me to have God fill those, I have to do it intentionally. And so, when you approach this intentionality, there is a headspace that goes into it, right? That's why when we worship, it's so easy, right? For when we worship, we're in a space physically, we're in a space spiritually, and we're praising God. So it's easy to feel God's presence, right? Because we've come there with the intent to worship, to hear words from God. But when we go to, our job, we don't really go there with the intent to find God, right? We go there with the intent to do our job, to maybe talk to our coworkers, right? And so that's why we're having a hard time getting those parts of our lives filled. It's because we're missing that intentionality with God. So that's why he's asking, where do you go with all of these empty jars? Right? With these empty parts of your life that don't have God in them. What are you doing? What are you doing with these jars? Like, am I just holding all of them? God, I got it. I got all these jars. We're gonna put them all over here, right? And we're not taking them to God. And so that brings us to the fourth point. This is the final point. This one's a little bit of a doozy, and it's my favorite part of this whole book. So 2 Kings 4:4-7. Elisha basically tells her to pour the jars until they are filled. Let's just think for a second. Can you just be this woman and be like a normal human being? You want me to take this small jar of olive oil, and you want me to pour all of that into the big jar of olive oil? Yeah, okay. Sure, bud. Yeah, I'll definitely pour all of it in there. Don't you worry about it. Like, it seems ridiculous. When God says, take this thing that you've limited me to, and pour it into what you think is a big aspect of your life. We know for God it's not a big aspect, right? Like we get that outside of this, right? But when we're actually in the moment, this jar is a big aspect of our life, and we're like, God, can you really fill all of it? Well, I don't know. At this point in the story, God has given her the promise. And all that's left is for her to obey. So this point of the story is a critical turning point. This is where it goes from Elisha saying something to her doing something. Right? We've always heard it's easier said than done. And it's very much the case in this, right? Like, I can find myself, and a great example is right now, me on the stage. It's very easy for me to tell you guys, go fill all the jars of your life. Let God take everything. Right? But then I almost got to do it too. And that's the thing that I've been struggling with recently, especially trying to come up and talk about it, is how do I do that, right? How do I go for it? Right? So she's now done listening. She's got to go do something. Right? So she does. She's great about it. She goes out, she asks her neighbors. Neighbors are like, you got jars? And she's like, man, I got jars. And she comes back and she has a house full of empty jars. Right? And so it says they brought the jars and they kept pouring when all of the jars were full. We're just going to gloss over that, God? We're going to gloss over that in the Bible? She came in with all these jars. She was like, oh, really? You're going to fill all these jars? And then all of the jars were full. Right? Something that we need to think about. God's going to fill every jar. He's going to fill all of them. He's going to fill all of them. Right? So she said, like any next person would do, yo, bring me another jar. We got olive oil for days. We got so much olive oil. Bring me another jar. And then the son replied, but there's not a jar left. We ran out of jars. And you know what's crazy? If you read it says it in here. And this is the part that got me. It says, but he replied, there is not a jar left. What's the next line? Then the oil stopped flowing. The oil only stopped flowing when there were no more jars. She could have brought infinity jars, and it would have filled every single one of them. She could have brought 2 jars, and it would have filled every single one of them. So the question is, how many jars? How many jars are you going to bring? Because God will fill all of them. We just saw that. And He will continue to fill them until you stop bringing Him jars. So along with that, when are we going to stop limiting God? Like, when am I just going to go, all right, God, if you fill that jar, sure as heck fill this jar. And you can fill this jar, and you can fill this jar, and you can fill this jar. And not just going, well, God, this is my special jar. This is the jar that's just me. And I know you don't like this jar, God, but I like this jar because it's pretty and it has a picture of a pony on it. And you could fill this jar. I don't know if I want you to. Because if you do, the jar's going to break don't fill this jar, God. God's like, no. Olive oil. Fill all the jars. I'm not going to break the jar. Just hand it over. Just give it to him. I'll fill it. I'll show you that it can hold the olive oil. This thing that you think can't hold God, this thing that you say maybe God can't do something in it, God will show you that he can. Once again, what if she had to do it? Right? She couldn't just listen. She had to act. And so some of the other things that God was showing me with this was God's crazy about this. Like there's some things that God's like, come with me, all your sins will be forgiven, which is just sin, which is great. But God gets real crazy with this. In John 6:38. You don't have to go there because I'm about to read the whole verse. But if you'd like to, you're more than welcome to. John 6:38. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, so forth. Give it, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. And then here's the key part. Right? We all like to press down, shake together. Ooh, a lot. I like a lot. Right? But we only like a lot. We get a lot, right? But for with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. You only get that lot. You only get that much. You only get a ton if you bring a big measuring cup. Right? When you bring a lot of jars, you get a lot of blessings. You get a lot of God, really is what it is. Because sometimes God does things that we're like, God, why'd you do that? It doesn't really feel like a blessing, but it is. But it is. So once again, how many jars are you bringing? Right? If you think God can only do this much, God's like, okay, thank you for giving that to me. Here you go. Jars filled. I want to fill those jars. No, John. We're not going to fill those jars. Good. So don't bring a few jars, people. Bring a lot. Malachi 3:10 is another great example of this. And this one is one of the few times God said something like this, which is wild. This is talking about money here, which is even crazier because we care a lot about money. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this. And just in case you forgot it was God, it immediately says right after, it says the Lord Almighty. Right? In case you forgot God was talking about, it was God that was saying this. And see if it will not be thrown open. The floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be a room enough to store it until every jar is full. And then it stops flowing. That's crazy. He said, test me. Isn't there a lot of times in the Bible he's like, don't test God? This one he said, test me. Which is crazy. Which means you can go all out and you're still ain't going to beat him. This is the case of if you could not fail, what could you do? This is it. This is it. That's God saying right there. You will not fail in giving your money to God. When it's God's money anyway. Right? When you give it to God, we ain't gonna fail. That's just how it is. Whew. Now there's a very cool similarity to the jars. Right? And I want you to catch this because Elisha does it again. Elisha didn't want you to, have the story and go, whatever. He does it again with the king later on. He does it again, and the king is about to go to war with these people. And Elisha's like, take these arrows. Now, these arrows, keep in mind, are the jars. Right? Or kind of. This analogy is the him striking the ground as the jars. So he says, take the arrows and strike the ground. The king's like, wow. Strike the ground with arrows. 1, 2, 3. Wasn't that pretty cool, Elisha? Elisha was like, what the heck? Why you slapped it 3 times? You could have slapped it 4. You could have slapped it 5. You could have slapped it 6. You could have broke the arrows, slapping them so hard. But you only slapped them 3 times. So you're only going to win 3 times. And then you're going to fail, right? Which is crazy. Because as of right now, Elijah tells me to grab those arrows to the ground. tornado until Elisha tells me to stop. Right? That's what this is showing us. He doesn't put a condition at the end. He says, stop the arrows 3 times. How much do you want your blessing? How many jars do you want filled? How much of your life do you want God to take control of? And I say all this, and it's not going to be easy, right? I come up here and I'm like, fill jars, it's super easy. I'm struggling with it right now, right? I mean, this is one of my jars. Coming up here and talking. It's not all of my jars. I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to collect those jars. Ask my neighbors for, what jar do I got out back? What did I put a potted plant in? What's the plant going to do in that jar? An olive oil. And it's not going to be easy, because you're going to get to a point. And I was in a similar place, because once again, I'm working on it. You get to a point, and you're in your house, wherever it may be. You've got 30. 30 is a lot. 35. It's more than 30. 35 empty jars. And it's just you. And you've got a small jar of olive oil. You go, God, I look pretty stupid right now. Sure hope this is you. Sure hope you're doing something. And the guy goes, thank you. Listen. You listened. You obeyed. This is where I take over. And then boom, jar filled, jar filled, jar filled. And he starts going crazy with it. Right? So that's where I want you guys to get with the end of this. As I'm concluding with this, as I'm ending with it, is you have jars in your life. You have things that you have forgotten about. Jars that are in the back, in the attic maybe, or jars that you don't want God to fill. So if God saw it, maybe he wouldn't like you. Okay. And you don't want him to fill these jars, or this jar is bad. If God filled it, he would get rid of it. Right? Like this is not a good thing to have. And you need to take inventory. Right? You need to see what you have, see what these jars are, and then don't forget about the small jar of olive oil. You've always got a small jar of olive oil. The question is how much you're going to use it. So with that, I'm going to conclude with prayer. So, Father, thank you for today. Thank you for this message that not only hopefully spoke to people, but speaks to me as well. And this idea that we have these aspects of our lives that are these empty jars, that are these portions of ourselves that we've sectioned off of life, and we go into them with a different intentionality. Some we fill with dirt, some we fill with water, some we fill with honey or something, and we tend to forget that those jars aren't meant for those things. That this jar is meant for olive oil. This jar is meant for you, and if all of these jars are full, we can pay off the debt, and then we can live off the rest. God. And so help us recognize these jars, empty jars of our life, as we go about the rest of today, the next week. Lord God, we thank you for all that you've done for us, and what you're going to do for us, Lord God. In Jesus' name we pray.
Thank you so much, man, for sharing that. I hope that all of you leave encouraged tonight. It's always difficult to take inventory of your life and then admit that you haven't let God in some spaces. But, and we've said it often, it just really comes down to, do you really believe that what God says is really real? Do you believe that he will fill a jar if you let it? Man, lots of conviction on me tonight, just things that I'm like, the potted plant made sense to me. I was like, I got lots of jars, I just have filled them with other things. And there's some emptying I need to do and allow God into those spaces. And right before I came in here tonight, I talked with a dear friend, and we talked about coming in with expectation and how that can get difficult sometimes. So sometimes the longer you're saved, the harder it is to recognize that God still wants to fill jars. And so to come into these spaces and to, when the worship team's up here, do we have empty jars so that God can fill them? So thank you so much for your word. I appreciate it. If you guys don't know, Alex and Becca are going to be leading up our foreign missions trip that we've been talking about. Both have an extreme heart for missions, have an extreme heart for winning the lost, but also even for seeing the church engage in missions. And so the truth is the world belongs to the young. We're here to encourage and do that, but man, God has so many big dreams for you guys and what you're doing. And so appreciate you speaking today. Thank you for being bold enough and giving that jar to God. Thank you guys for listening. And one more time, a round of applause for Alex. We appreciate you.